Good evening and welcome to Common Talk once again. Tonight, we're going to have two real clowns on the show. No, the selectmen were last week. And I'm not talking about Dan Lasdow and I'm not talking about Bob Simpson. Later in the program, however, we are going to bring you a piece of tape we made yesterday when two real clowns from the Roberts Brothers Circus were in town to talk about next week's performance of the circus, which will be 1 week from today, right out back of the high school. We know you won't want to miss the circus, and we'll be talking about the circus a little later with our guests tonight, who are Dan Lasdow, familiar, I'm sure, to all the school children of East Bridgewater, and by now, most all the parents. Dan is the veteran director of music in the East Bridgewater Public Schools. And with Dan tonight is Bob Simpson, resident of East Street, a former member of the Personnel Board, active in local civic organizations, and this year, the new president of the Music Parents Association. So we've got three things we want to talk about. The school musical program, the success of the musical groups. We want to talk about the Music Parents Association and what it does. And then finally, we're going to look at those clowns, and we're going to talk about the circus. Before we get started with those subjects, though, I just want to mention a little bit about the very nice comments that we heard all week, ever since last week's show with the selectmen. I want to thank you for that. And I want to tell you that we've met this show's #1 fan. We met her last Thursday night at the band concert, and she's my #1 fan because she said, "You're not as fat as you look on television." I'm not as bald either, by the way, but you'll have to go to the band concert tomorrow night, I guess, to determine that for yourself. Next week, we'll be talking about the special town meeting coming up on August 4th. Then we're going to take a week off, and we'll tell you more about our plans at the end of tonight's program. But I think we should get right to it. I'd like to welcome you, Dan and Bob, to Common Talk. I'm glad you could be here with us tonight. I wonder if, first of all, we might begin, Mr. Lasdow, for the children watching, with you. How long have you been in East Bridgewater? What did you do before that? How did you happen to come here? How does it feel to be here?
Well, thank you very much for having me tonight, Peter. I appreciate being on. And I've been here 14 years, beginning 15 in September. Before I came here, I taught at Silver Lake Junior High School for 4 years, and I taught in the Boston schools for a brief time, right after I got out of college. I enjoyed it very much. It's been a long 14 years. Put a lot of hard work into it, but I think the results are obvious, and I think the town has a music program they can be very proud of.
And let me say, I think, knowing the community a little bit, the town certainly is proud of the musical program. When you said 14 years, I couldn't believe it. I take no credit for you being here. I was at that time a member of the school committee, as you remember. And I should say this to you, I think, and I know that people would agree. East Bridgewater had a fine tradition of music directors in the past, Luther Churchill and Don Leach and Robert Spencer and John Schuler. And then I think it's fair to say the music program fell on bad times. There was a citizens committee, as you remember, of musical people, whatever a musical person is, who was involved, or which was involved in the selection. And so 15 years later, congratulations, Dan, for what you've done.
Thank you. It needs time. A program like this needs time, and I've been fortunate to have the time to spend here and put in these many years. And it's always a pleasure to play on the Common Thursday nights with Dick Whitmarsh and the South Shore Band, and you talk about the music directors. I think Tony Ferranti, John Schuler, myself, Don Leach is there, and we have a cadre of present and former music directors on the bandstand. It's really an honor to play with those gentlemen.
And we should remind people watching tonight that the next band concert in that series is tomorrow night from 7 to 9, isn't it?
That's right.
On the Common.
That's right.
Bob, I don't want to leave you out,
No,
but
that's fine.
as we said, we're going to talk about the
Sure.
musical organizations first. But as a parent, do you have a kind of a general opening comment about the quality of the overall music program in the system?
Well, I think like a lot of parents, we got involved when our kids got involved. And my daughter's very involved in the music program and going into her senior year in it. And over the years, we've seen it do nothing but grow. And as music parents and as parents of the community, we want to continue to see that happen. And we want to support Dan's efforts.
And we might note, by the way, that Mrs. Robert Simpson, Linda, is a member of the East Bridgewater School Committee.
Right.
And so a lot of support for the music program in that family, I'm sure. Dan, we tend to concentrate on the high school band. That's what gets headlines. But can you give us a little bit of an overview of the system-wide music program and maybe some of the other performing groups? What does a child do musically in the East Bridgewater school system?
Well, we talk about the 14 years I've been here. I'm only one person, and we have a team of music educators that are very professional, very fine teachers. Mrs. Wilcox at the middle school, who teaches grades 5 through 8, 5 through 7 classroom music in the choruses, and she also teaches the high school chorus and show choir. John Fantuccio, who teaches at the middle school, grades 5 through 8 instrumental music, and the blue band, the gold band, and beginners group. And down at the central school, Mrs. Mary Ann Rebin, who teaches K through 4 elementary classroom music in the choruses, recorded groups. These people are just magnificent teachers, and the town is very fortunate to have them. It's not a one-man operation by any means. These people are just fantastic. And they have the musical skills to carry off the program. They have the love of children and the care for children, and they just bring them along. The choral program is a perfect example of quality teaching through the grades. Mrs. Wilcox is so knowledgeable of the human voice, and particularly the young voices, children's voices, and how to develop that voice. She trains them well. She brings them along so that when they get to the high school and perform in the high school choir, it's just magnificent. And this year, there's been some fine music by those kids.
Well, you stressed voices. Now, suppose I were a new parent, a new resident of East Bridgewater with an elementary school-aged child, and I wanted that child to have some instrumental instruction. What would I do? How do I get my child started with that?
Well, we begin students in grade 5, a formal band instrument study in grade 5. However, when they get to central school, they get exposed to music from kindergarten right through. And Mrs. Rebin begins her recorded group in the 3rd grade, and they have a chance to learn some of the manual dexterity, and they learn how to read notes and how to blow on an instrument. They also have rhythm band experience right from the beginning with rhythm sticks and drums and that sort of thing, and develops their sense of time. And they do a lot of movement too, dancing, bodily movement to music, which further enhances their rhythmic skills. So they have a lot of exposure. If I was a parent of a young child, I'd say don't push it, don't rush it. Give them time, give them plenty of exposure to good music and encourage it, but don't push.
You're not going to like me for this question, and I know it's a bad question. I'm going to ask you a question. It's sort of like evaluating the physical education program on the one-loss record of the football team, so you can guess what's coming. That is, I know you're a music educator, and I know you've just stressed that. But for the casual observer, we do look at the trophies when we come into the high school. Can you give us a little bit of a recap of the outstanding successes that the town's groups have had, let's say, in the last few years?
Well, the high school band and the choirs are the most exposed groups. They perform for the largest audience, the greatest amount of people. High school band holds the title of New England Scholastic Band Association champions. They hold the title of the state marching band champion, New England and state parade champions. The trophies are symbolic. They're symbolic of wonderful performances. When you ask me to recap, it's awfully hard because I don't really remember a lot of the trophies and the titles. What I do remember are the beautiful performances. And as I tell the students, once you perform it and you do it to your very best, regardless of the outcome, no one can take that away from you. You've won when you've performed to your highest level, and that's what I remember most.
You know, Bob, as a parent and member of your association and husband of school committee member and so forth, I know that you must be thrilled by the success of these groups. I was, as it happened in the parking lot, to be on hand when you all came back from Washington this spring. And I wonder if you can give us a sense of your feeling about, let's just say, anything, but particularly that Washington trip, which had to have capped several years of real effort. How did you feel being there? How did you feel afterwards?
You know, Pete, I think you can summarize it by saying goosebumps. And Dan makes a very good point. The trophies were an aftermath. There was something physical, a piece of metal there, But the feeling the kids got in winning down in Washington and competing on that level and coming out and being successful, you had to be there to appreciate it. I think if we did it again, we'd probably have 6 busloads of parents coming with us after we came back with the joy we had. It was just unbelievable. It was like being at the Olympics and seeing your kid win.
And what about for you, Dan? If it were the Olympics, then you were the chairman of the Olympic Committee or you were the head coach. How did it feel for you, just that one weekend?
Well, we set a goal of going down and sharing our performances, and we were going to give more than receive. And the students did exactly that. We performed for some of the finest judges in the country, college band directors, people who are noted in their field, who are respected worldwide, and we received their recognition, their evaluation. We met their standard, but we also met our own. And it was just a wonderful feeling of accomplishment and achievement, and we won as soon as the last note was over in the performance because and everyone did so well.
That's it. What groups went and what was won? I know, once again, I'm stressing winning and losing, but that was like a once-in-a-lifetime, maybe. What exactly were the results of that competition?
We brought our marching band, our concert band, show choir, winter color guard. Did I leave anybody out? I think that was it. And the high school concert choir. And we performed, we did concert band performance. We had required selections to perform, plus one of our own choosing. We received the superior rating in concert band. The concert choir performed 3 selections. They received the superior rating. The show choir performed their routine and received the superior rating. The marching band performed their field show, also received superior rating, and we received an excellent rating in the parade. We were I believe, the best overall marching band in the festival.
The thing that fascinates me, to change the subject only a little bit, it seems as though your drum majors, if that's the right term, are practically undefeated for like 5 or 6 years. You always seem to have a top drum major. Now, I admit to knowing nothing about music. I enjoy the spectacle of the field show. But I find myself fascinated by the drum major whose concentration is amazing and whose animation, no matter who it is, has been for years the focal point. How do you train a drum major, and what's the secret of East Bridgewater's success in that regard? You're not bringing these people in from outside, right?
No,
they're not professionals.
Not at all. No, they come
How
from
come
the
they're so
band.
good?
The kids come out of the band that have been the drum majors.
Does that mean that first they are musicians?
They are musicians first. They play an instrument. There are certain requirements they have to meet. They have to memorize their music as well as anyone else in the band. They have to learn how to conduct. They have to set the finest example, and they have to lead the group in a practice session so that they get a chance to try out their command skills and so forth. We encourage anyone who wishes to apply. They write a letter of application to me. We meet and we have an extensive interview process, and we ask them some pretty difficult questions about their attitude, and we give them situations. So we place them in situations and ask them how they would respond. We screen them quite well. They have a year, traditionally, of breaking in under a senior drum major, so that there's a transition that follows every year. One of the successes that Sandy Higgins has had stems from the fact that not only is she an outstanding young lady, an outstanding individual, but she attended the George Parks School of Drum Majoring out in Amherst last summer. George is a respected music educator. He's on the faculty at UMass Amherst, and he's a national champion drum major. So the students have a chance to go and study with him for a week, and they come back with a lot of very fine attitudes that they bring to the band, and it helps a lot.
You know, we're taking a break from our usual format of talking about local political issues, and I'm suddenly realizing I'm a lot more comfortable with those than I am with music. But speaking of drum major, whatever happened, I think, to people with batons and twirling and things like that? That doesn't seem to be part of the spectacle anymore, or am I wrong?
Some drum majors use a mace, which is the long stick with a ball on the end that they use. I left it last year up to Sandy. If she felt that she'd feel comfortable with that and she'd like to use it, fine. If not, fine. And she developed her own individual style, which I think is terrific, and we've just left it at that.
I'll give you something to think about. I'm going to ask you what you consider to be, either or both of you, the major factors responsible for the success of the musical groups we've been talking about. But Paul is telling us that we have our first phone call, and this is sort of like opening your birthday present. You just don't know what's in there. So let's reach into the telephone grab bag tonight and see what we've got. Good evening and welcome to Common Talk. Do you have a question or a comment?
Oh, good evening, sir. I'd just like to ask Mr. Lasdow a question. Mr. Lasdow, when was the last time we had a male drum major?
I don't think we ever have. For one reason or another, the girls have tried out, and we've had some applicants, but it just seems that the girls have been the best.
Do you want to go ahead, caller, or are you still with us?
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay. I'll follow up for you on that. Now that I think of it, I guess that's a worthwhile question. I remember wondering why we didn't have male cheerleaders, too, because if you look at college cheerleading squads, the men contribute a good deal through gymnastics and so forth. Have we had male cheerleaders?
Not that I know of.
It's not that they don't exist. I mean, we see them as we go through the competition.
Male drum majors?
Sure, but, you know, as Dan says, the tryouts have been that they've turned out to be girls here.
Okay, let's try another caller. Good evening, welcome to Common Talk. Do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I have a comment. My son was the first drum major that East Bridgewater High had under Dan Lasdow back in 1978 or 79, I think it was, Scott Irving.
Okay, Dan, do you remember?
That's right. I'd forgotten about Scott. Sure, that's
I-
right. Scott was
Go ahead,
was a
caller.
fine drum
Okay,
major.
and he also was the first male cheerleader. He was the cheerleader for the basketball team the year he graduated in 1980.
Good for him.
All
That's
right.
great.
That's
Okay,
great. Sure, Scott.
all
We'll
right,
go back to
Scott, and I guess caller Dan and I both have demonstrated the aging process here.
Well, I'm his mother, so I guess I haven't.
No, I heard somebody say the other day that one thing about getting older is you begin to forget things. That's one of them. There are others, but I don't remember them.
Oh, I forget a lot. A grown child, you tend to remember.
Sure. Did you want to add something else, Mrs. Irving, or shall we say goodnight?
Oh, that'll be all. Thank you.
Well, thank you for calling.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Getting back to the question we left hanging a couple of minutes ago, if you had to make a list, however long, 1, 2, 3, or a dozen, what factors would you identify as being important in the success of the musical program and the performing groups?
Well, I think first of all, the town was ready to support a music program, and the support has been tremendous over the years. Another reason I think is the fine teaching. We've been fortunate with Mrs. Wilcox, Mr. Fantuccio, Mrs. Redmond, and others who have been on the faculty over the years to give the students some very fine instruction. Our Music Parents Association has been tremendous. Without them, we couldn't have the program at all the way we know it. And I think it's a combination of all of those factors that contributes to it.
Well, I think, Bob?
One of the things that I pick up on, Pete, is the kids' team effort. These kids get out there, and if somebody trips a little bit or fondles on something, they pick them up and they help them, and they support each other. And you see these kids not only in the band, but they're also in the chorus. They're jumping from activity to activity, and they become a very tight family. And you don't see that in all groups. And this tight family supports and takes care of each other, and when they go on these trips and compete, you see that spirit come out in their competitions and their exhibitions.
I haven't really been involved with the musical program, even as a parent. My daughter was a member of the chorus or choir, whatever, that did compete. I can't say that I ever got fully involved, but I always admired the Music Parents Association. And as a school board member, the reason was not financial, which we'll talk about a little later, but it was this. I believe that a community's attitude about a project will make that project succeed, because the parents do influence kids' attitudes. And if the parents are out there working as you all do, the kids have to realize that it's a worthwhile project. So maybe I'd put the Parents Association right up there with the quality of the personnel. Yeah. And of course, the taxpayers as well, because we couldn't do any of this without a school budget. I know you fight and fight and fight for as much as the program needs, and it always can't be funded, but nevertheless, the town has made, I think, a major commitment to music, and congratulations. And with that thought, we'll do what they do in real television. We'll pause for a minute, and we'll look at some messages of interest. When we come back, we'll concentrate on the Music Parents Association, find out a little bit more about it, what it does, and why it does what it does. We're going to stay here. It's really you that are going away, as I pointed out last week, so you come back.